people come through. Sasha will let them in. First of all, good morning, everyone. It's so good to see all of you, to see you, and to see many of you are up really early. So thank you for that commitment. I really appreciate it sincerely. And welcome to our first TED Ed Chats. For those of you that aren't aware, or I know most of you might have found this, or all of you found this through the hub, TED Ed Chats is a space and a place. It's a new medium platform that we're working with and using to continue to share talks, but also to dig deeper and build upon some really crucial ideas and some challenging topics as we think about the educational landscape. Right. And so many times we have our wonderful talks, which give us such great insight. And if you're like me, there are so many times where I'm yelling at my screen, like, wait, I want to know more, go deeper. Like, can I talk to the speaker? And so that's a little bit about of what this space is supposed to resemble, as well as just a space and place that hopefully can be safe and brave for us to deep dive into discussions that push this educational work forward and that prompt us to ideas and hopefully get more and more people to be sharing their ideas and creating their own talks. So a little bit today, we are going to have our guest, Shawn. And before I start with Shawn and I introduce him and we get to our Q&A, after our Q&A, after our interview with me and Shawn, we'll go into a deep dive into a group discussion. And then after that group discussion, we'll then open up to just sharing out from that discussion and or Q&A, questions and answers. So anything you hear, if you have any questions for Shawn, please jot them down, write them down on a notepad, or if you can memorize it until the end. And then afterwards, we'll close and we'll give you the rest of your day. And hopefully you'll be ready and energized to tackle all of those ed challenges that await. Some I call it housewarming rules, or some house rules, some Zoom rules, I guess, are because will be, a little bit of back and forth between Shawn and I will ask that everyone remains muted until the group discussion, right? Just so that we don't have any feedback or any other noise coming through. So if you could do that, that'd be perfect. I love that I can see the gallery. And so I love seeing all of your beautiful faces. Please continue that up. But if for any reason, there is something happening, feel free to mute your video, to turn off your video if you feel like you need to for any reason. Enjoy. And also, as you know, please, after this, send us feedback on the hub. Tell us how you enjoyed us, comment on the post and tell us what you think, or what other topics we might or should cover in the future. Sound good? Beautiful. Yes, love the thumbs up. Thank you. All right, so to start, we have the wonderful Shawn Loescher. I hope that I pronounced that right, Shawn. Shawn is an active practitioner with over 25 years of experience, both domestically and abroad, in educational innovation and school system design. He currently serves as a Chief Executive Officer of Urban Discovery Schools, an inner city TK through 12 school system in San Diego, California. For 2021, Urban Discovery has been named by the Christensen Institute of Boston as one of the 144 most innovative school systems in the world. Dr. Loescher also is a guest professor of the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College at Arizona State University Doctorate of Leadership and Innovation program, where he teaches coursework on the topics of critical theory, social justice, and action research. In 2019, Dr. Loescher was named one of 16 worldwide recipients of the TED Innovator Educators Award. He is a TIE, in fact, and gave his TED Educator talk at the TED Summit 2019 in Edinburgh, Scotland, titled Embrace Ambiguity: Why Predictive Metrics Aren't Helping. He's an American Educational Research Associate or awarded scholarly practitioner in the field of action research and sciences, and is a sought after keynote speaker, guest lecturer, consultant, and think tank participant. To sum all of that up, if you don't know Shawn, he is dope. And he is a really, really, really amazing person. So I'm really glad that we have this chance to talk. Shawn, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well. We're out here in San Diego, California, and the sun's just coming up, and it's another wonderful day here.
Beautiful, beautiful. Shawn, can you, I know I just like gave us, your whole life story, but can you add some color to that bio that I just shared? Tell us a little bit about yourself, about some of the work you do and what it means to be the CEO of Urban Discovery Schools.
Sure. First, I want to put out there, Urban Discovery Schools is here in San Diego, California. It is a public school system, free to the public, and anybody can attend. We have no rules for attendance. We're located in downtown San Diego, in part of San Diego called the East Village. Um, Urban Discovery is what's called a laboratory school model. It's several locations, but it's run in partnership with UC San Diego. We actively are engaged in educational innovations. Specifically with UC San Diego, we're actively engaged with two divisions. The first is the UC San Diego Design Lab, which was founded by Don Norman from Apple Computers fame, also of the fame of the book, The Design of Everyday Things. And from that connection, we are what is known as a design thinking school, which is a theory and an approach to developing the world, to developing products, but also to education. And for our educator friends, design thinking has been written about as the manifestation of constructivist practice as outlined by Dewey. Our good friend John Dewey, he talks about constructivism, but he doesn't actually leave us with a list of how you do it. He just talks about it as a general theory. Within education, design theory has been identified in design thinking as a way of actualizing constructivist theory in our classroom. And our approach at Urban Discovery is not that we just do it in our classroom, but we do it as a way of operating the school site. We do it as a way of interacting with our parents. We do it as an approach for how we interact with our community. The second part of UC San Diego that we work with actively is UCSD extensions. And through UCSD extensions, we provide a lot of professional development for our teachers. We were just listing yesterday in reflection with our cabinet team that this year, the total number of professional development days that we're providing for our teachers is reaching 30 full days of professional development throughout the year to support them. And I want to be clear, when I say teachers, I mean the term educator. We treat everybody at Urban Discovery as an educator. So whether you're working the front desk or in the back office, we're engaged in everybody coming together for that professional development. So if you're an instructional aide, you're doing SEDI training right alongside as a certificated teacher, and we're all working through that together. So we work with extensions on that. And then the second part is extensions works with us to be sure that all of our high school students are getting free college credit at UC San Diego for a lot of the advanced coursework that they're taking in design theory and getting a professional certification as well. So we have all of those partnerships in place. As far as a day-to-day at Urban Discovery Schools, I am highly privileged to work with a team of principals and members of our learning community, where I get to participate in individual meetings and lead design initiatives with them, but also work with our community members, whether it be community members in the field and non-governmental organizations, or working on design strategies and principles with other universities, whether it be Arizona State University or members from Harvard Graduate School, to be able to not just work on those innovations locally, but an innovation locally that's successful needs to be shared at a different level. So that way we all gain from the experience, whether we're right or whether we're wrong. So we can share all that information. Background and experience is, previously I've been an executive director of innovation and chief of staff of a larger school district. I've been a district director of one of the largest districts in the United States, and in that capacity worked on several significant redesigns of high schools and middle schools, including leading their transformation initiatives. When I go back to the time that I was working at a school site before that. I was at Madison High School, where we led an initiative that was transforming that school and increasing graduation rates significantly. And factually, the redesign initiatives at Madison High School led to the secondary school of redesign and National Association of Secondary School Principals winning of the National Breakthrough School Award for what we were able to provide for our students and work with our students on to increase achievement. And going back, way back before that, and where the international experience came from was right after completing college, I decided to join a team in Eastern Europe, right at the fall of communism and the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia, to jump into their education system and to help develop some of their education initiatives over on the other side of the pond. So it's a bit about my background and experience.
Yeah, okay. Some things, or a lot of things actually I didn't know, Shawn. I didn't know some of that international experience.
Well, Bobby, I think it's fair to say we have a guest on today. Jerry is with us. We all met together for the first time in Edinburgh and didn't get quite enough time to spend with you. As I recall, your first day was hopping off the plane
Yeah.
and walking into a meeting room with Jerry and I and Logan and others, and literally fighting off jet lag like a warrior in a way that I could not achieve. So
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, that was definitely, yeah. For those of you listening, the yeah, my first time or my first day at TED was actually at the 2019 summit in Edinburgh. So almost what, July will make 2 years. But that was yeah, where I first met Shawn and Jerry and Marissa. And yes, I hopped off a plane and went straight into a workshop, and I was trying to fight sleep so badly. But you're right. You're right. There was so I'm glad to continue to know and to learn more about you here. Um, so one of the things that I know is important as we talk about education, I was talking with another TIE, actually, Greg Farrell, who you know, and we were talking about how context is, very important, right? That sometimes the problem with education is when we try to think of a one size fits all model. And so I wanted to get into the context before we actually jump into, like your idea and the innovation that you're talking about today. I want to hear about the context of your community. And so can you, just paint the picture of like what does your community look like? And when I say community, I mean, your school community, the families, the students, the teachers, the makeup, what is that? What are their strengths? What are some of the challenges that face your community?
well, first of all, thanks for starting with context, Bobby. In education, my personal experience and belief structure tells me that context is everything. And that's why when we talk about change in education, we really look at the school site level. Now, the district level is important so that way we can balance resources. And even broader than that, it's important that we look out at the state and note that, our communities are vastly different. And we need to look at things very differently, even at the state level, that we need to be able to shift resources around, that different places have different needs, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
If we think of ourselves as one people, one family, in a broader sense, we should be able to get our heads around that different places need different things, and that's okay. But that individual change block, are those schools and clusters of schools together. So for our cluster of schools, I happen to wax philosophically and love my downtown area of San Diego because I'm a native San Diegan. Now, I've worked a lot of different places, but I come back to San Diego over and over again. And the greater Southern California mega region of San Diego and Los Angeles and the Inland Empire is something that I truly love and I'm passionate about. It's not that I don't love the Bay Area, Bobby. I know you're from up there. I do love the Bay Area. It's this is where I've been located, and this is where my family's been for many generations. And I tend to look at this area with awe and wonderment. And with San Diego, one of the things that has happened is something that I'm both thrilled about, but something also that I'm studying and something that concerns me, which is in San Diego, the redevelopment of downtown where my schools are located
Mm.
really has bifurcated the community. Now, what I mean by that is we have people that are living in extreme wealth in these high rises that are going up downtown, located right next to people who are being displaced by that redevelopment effort.
Mm.
So, what we have typically at Urban Discovery Schools is increasingly a smaller and smaller segment of what we like to refer to economically as that lower middle class, the blue collar worker area. And what we have is a division where we have a lot of people that either come into downtown to work in those high rises or live in those high rises that have gone up versus people that are living in sometimes what is the lowest quartile of poverty.
Mm.
And they're living in close proximity to each other. And what we love about that at Urban Discovery is that's what makes our school stronger, is we can have those discussions together because we represent an extraordinarily diverse community.
Mm.
Now, I don't like the term minority because I don't think it's an appropriate term inside of the United States. But we don't have any particular group of people ethnicity wise that represent over 50% at Urban Discovery.
Mm.
We have we have all different people coming together, and we're a fair representative of downtown San Diego in our community. And again, that's because we let everybody come into our school that's interested in our school. We sometimes have a little bit of a rub about that because we're always scrambling to make sure that we have enough seats, and clearly we only have so much square footage available. So we're constantly looking to redevelop land and do things to make sure that we can increase our capacity. What are the things that we face as our challenges right now? I think is a fair thing to say that many of us are facing across the world. We all think locally, and local context is important. But we have to remember that what has happened in the pandemic is impacting 1.5 billion children across the world. It's not just the children within our school or within our school district. 1.5 billion children have had their educational experience disrupted on planet Earth. And a lot of the stories we're telling are the same. What we're encountering is record high unemployment right now, families that are struggling in order to figure out what's next, families that don't necessarily understand what the laws are as they're emerging, even in terms of making sure that we have families that understand what their rights are.
Mm.
And in terms of making sure that they have all of the basics that they need in order to get back to a focus on education, because it's really hard right now for our community to look with hope and optimism about the future when you're worried about what's going to happen next
Right.
week or in the next few days.
Oh, right. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And so as you think about your school community, and I want now to turn into your idea. And so how do you, which I'll name as I think is the CSO model, correct me if that's not, the idea, but how did you see, I think the one, I would love you to explain what is your idea, what is the CSO model? And then we'll move into how that answers some of the challenges of the context that you're speaking about.
Sure. So let me give a little bit of context so that way everybody has it in terms of the background.
Yeah.
In 2019, I got an incredible phone call, and the phone call was you've been nominated for this thing called a TED Innovative Educator. I didn't know about it. Factually speaking, when I got the first phone call about it, I actually told the person on the other end that I didn't take crank phone calls and hung up on them. They had to call me back. Yeah, I was like, oh, it's a 212 number. I better answer this. I don't get a lot of New York calls. All right, who is this? Yeah, I'm not up for a joke. I don't have time to talk. And they called back and they worked me through it. And I got to know a group of 15 other amazing educators from across the world that completely rocked my world as to the work that they're doing, and have remained in contact with them. And again, Jerry's on the line today, and he was one of those people that, just is awe-inspiring. Part of that was going through the TED Masterclass, and going through TED Masterclass really taught me to think about how I present things in different ways to think about things. And specifically, a concept in TED Masterclass is called through line. And it's thinking through your through line. And it made me factually not just present differently at conferences and talk differently at concerts. It also had me rethinking a lot of what I did at a school site in terms of strategic planning. I started looking at things and saying, well, what's the through line of our strategic plan to get to student achievement?
Yeah.
How do we get through this? And I did do that TED Talk in Edinburgh, and that was a wonderful experience that right now seems like 4 lifetimes ago, but at the same time still is near and dear to my heart. But in the middle of all of that, in the middle of the pandemic, I was working with Steph Ning, who is with us here at TED Ed, and she and I were having an in-depth conversation, and it led to me crafting a second very small TED Talk for one of the online conferences with TED Ed. And that discussion was called What is Our Through Line? And it was written shortly after the murder of George Floyd. And it was written in the middle of me spending days, like so many of us, contemplating, crying, trying to figure out what's happened here. Why is this still a thing? And in the middle of crafting that, I was thinking about all of my community and our young people, what they were experiencing. And the idea that I was sharing with my team wasn't on a specific position. And the position that we're talking about today, Bobby, is called Coaching Outreach and Supports. And it's gone through different titles. And right now we use that title pretty frequently. But really, the broader discussion was, why are schools designed to do something that isn't necessarily addressing all of the needs of the community that need to happen before a student can be centered on focusing on their education? And really having a discussion that I've had many times, but in this iteration, it was more profound. And the reason why it was more profound is lots of times the things that we do at schools, we look at in sort of an education model of saying, well, this is what we do because this is the day-to-day business of what we do. This is how we do things. This is the building. This is the transportation. This is how we do it. And none of that was relevant with the pandemic. Everything had been completely disrupted. So no longer was there a question on the table. And that question that used to exist was, can things fundamentally be done differently at a school or in a school district? That question has been answered. Now let's be fair to everybody. You may not have liked the results, but the question has been answered that it can fundamentally be done differently. And once we have gotten into that, and I always try to look for the good in anything, even in the pain and suffering of what we're experiencing as a collective trauma, of losing more people to COVID-19 in 10 months than we lost in all of World War II in 5 years. Even in the middle of that collective pain and trauma, I'm trying to look through for one kernel of something that we can look for hope and what's good. And when we were looking at that, we have answered the question. Yes, there are different ways of learning. There are different ways of engaging. There are different ways that are thinking and different things that are there. And when we started looking at that in our school system, knowing that we had addressed so many of the challenges that are out there that other school districts were continuing to struggle with. We had 99% of our population, we had arranged in advance for them to have broadband internet and had distributed hotspot units to others that needed them. We had 100% computer distribution out the doors. I did something that probably is not a best practice, and I'll probably get dinged for it on a state audit. I didn't even ask for inventory to check out the computers. I told the schools, open up your doors, get the computers out the door, and get everything home. Make sure that if a family needs chairs and desks and furniture, whatever they need, empty the classrooms. I don't care. Let's get them what they need, because we don't know how long we're going to be in this. That wasn't a prediction. I thought maybe a couple of months at best.
Yeah.
I didn't think we'd be sitting around 10, 12 months later or looking at vaccination rates and completion in 2022. We did all that. But part of the discussion we had was looking at all of the positions across our organization, and then noting in the opening months how much time teachers were investing in their day-to-day activities, in calling students, trying to get them to engage, checking in on families, looking at everything that was there. And we came to the following conclusion as a design team. If we were another system, for example, a medical system, the solution to the problems we were facing probably wouldn't be to add more doctors. It probably would be to add more nurses or orderlies or something else to take care of the day-to-day things that were happening. And so in order to support our teachers and our families, we came up with this position of coaching, outreach, and supports, which is a group of individuals that we brought in to deal with the day-to-day things happening in students' lives and in families' lives. And that position is among the most flexible, diverse positions we have. That position may be a tutor for a student on one day. That position may be driving around and dropping off food supplies for families. Again, I don't want my families getting on public transportation and coming to some central point of distribution. And a lot of my families are on public transportation. That's not safe right now. That position may be going and teaching a family how to access broadband internet, how to transfer your telephone lifeline services to broadband internet lifeline services, so that way you can get a VoIP phone installed and have broadband internet at home. That position may be someone that is just delivering fundamental supplies to a family because things haven't gone the way they thought they would. That position may be somebody that's counseling a family through navigating the unemployment system. So it's really a position that is keenly put in place for social work activities, for student support activities, not as a means of saying that the school needs to do that ongoing, but as a means of helping a family navigate that in the now. So that way they can get back to having their students learn and plan for that future that they're going to take part in one way or the other.
And how do you see that, right? So this position, this team that you designed, this individual, this manager of coaching, outreach, and support that, does various things. I see like they assess the need of the family. If the family needs food, they go and get it. If they need counseling, they give it to them. If they need other supports, I think of almost to be, medically speaking, almost like triage, right? Or like, in the trauma center in a hospital, like they're, attending to all the immediate needs. How do you see that connecting to student outcomes or like the progress happening in the classroom, right? Or in the schoolhouse?
Sure. Yeah. I personally see it directly. Sometimes what we ask of our families and our students seems reasonable. And I'm going to speak now as a teacher. And I understand that once you cross the line into administration, sometimes you're not viewed as a teacher anymore. But I'm still, in my heart and soul, I'm still a teacher standing in my classroom from years ago, looking at the needs of my students. And sometimes as a teacher and an educator, what I'm asking seems in the now reasonable, but contextually is not as reasonable. And I want to put it in no uncertain terms. We have to know our students and deeply empathize with their home situation in order to get them what they need. So that way we can all graduate high school on equal footing to get into our society. But it's really hard to do homework when you don't know where your home is going to be tomorrow. Okay? It's really hard to read that textbook when you can't see.
Hmm.
It's really hard to focus in on learning when you're lightheaded from your blood sugar not being out okay because you didn't have food to eat. It's hard to focus in on what's being talked about either in your Zoom room or your classroom when you have cavities in your teeth and the pain is there, and the pain is so persistent and it's been happening for so long you don't even recognize it as a pain anymore. It's just how you are living, right? It's hard to ask parents or grandma and grandpa or whoever the guardian is to interact and to support student learning at home when you don't know whether you're going to make rent at the end of the month or if you have enough food to put on the table. So some of the requests we think we're making seem reasonable in the moment of making them, as we're looking at, the TikTok of the 180, 182 days of the school year and what we want to get in and what we're doing. It seems reasonable, but it's not when you contextualize it in the lives of students. And those are just some fundamental ones. We're not talking about dealing with the collective pain and trauma of being in a urban environment or in an environment where students have to cross 4 gang lines to get into school or have experienced shootings that are in the community or have 5 friends that are dead when you're growing up and are dealing with PTSD and all the other things that are happening. Right? So as educators, wherever we are, we have to contextually deeply understand what our students are going through, not to exercise pity, but to exercise empathy of what we need to do in order to reach them. And I want to be clear on that sort of point, as I know we need to transition. Pity would allow for us to come up with an excuse of why we shouldn't have high expectations for our students. Empathy is a process of understanding that their circumstance may be very different than what we thought, and we have to do things fundamentally different in order to reach them and go through a process of walking with them in that journey. So that way we can get to a high outcome for them and with them.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Shawn. Um, right now, we're going to transition into our larger discussion. And so Sasha is going to unpin us and there'll be some discussion questions that come up. And now I'm going to open up the floor for all of us to engage around these questions. And then after that, we'll go for about 15 minutes. And after that, we'll go to a share out and Q&A portion.
One second.
No worries.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, thank you, Sasha.
Great, go for it.
And so thinking right around this really, really wonderful and complex conversation that Shawn has now opened up these bucket of worms to, I want us to think about our classrooms, our schools, health and wellness. And I want us to think if you could redesign the current school model to address a critical need of your community, what would you change or what would you add? What do you see being some of those needs? So I'm gonna give us some think time, but I would love to hear from folks to just share out what might you redesign as you think expansively and think holistically about your school, your classroom, your school system. Also, I'll say if I know number one is a big question, and so if you might need number two as a pre-step, or if it makes sense to answer that before, that might be helpful. um, what are needs, and we can talk through any of these in no specific order. So if you just have an answer to a question, one of the questions on here that you want to answer, feel free to do that too. Number two, what are the needs in your own community and context? What does the needs assessment in your community look like? And number three, how do you support your people, staff, students, colleagues, yourself, families? What are the systems of support that you provide or might be needed? Jerry, is that you about to speak?
Yeah, I have a question if that's okay for Shawn.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Shawn, I mean, what an accurate and powerful insight onto how we're currently navigating the situation. One of the things, to get to the first question, one of the things that we're thinking about, but I want to pick your brain in this redesign is, we only know what we know based on our experiences. And some of the challenges that we're facing in my district is staff that really wasn't operating in that that mindset of that innovative mindset. They were traditionalists and used to the way they've always done things. Some of the conversations, and I have reached out to you, Shawn, periodically to pick your brain over this pandemic, but I want to know what your thought is and how this redesign looks like. So what conversations we're having are about flexible scheduling to allow our students to work at the high school and maybe help support their families, but also to help support families that are faced with these multifamily dwellings and childcare issues. And so, but these are limited to the space that we're in, the innovative mindset that we're in. And I'm hoping to be more a part of these and have conversations with more people like you that help broaden our view of what this redesign looks like. So what are your thoughts on how we look when we come out of this?
What I'll state first, Jerry, is what I hope for. And I mean this really respectfully in terms of what we've all experienced. What I hope is we don't leave the pandemic looking the same way we did when we went into the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I say that is it would indicate that we didn't learn anything through the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I believe we've learned a great deal of things. Now, how that might play out at the other side of the pandemic may look very differently, at least in my experience, may look very differently in kindergarten as opposed it looks in 12th grade. However, what we're trying to do is recognize that there is a sense of urgency of doing things differently, and a lot of the things that confined us, the binding factors around us, we've been freed of, and to talk about that freedom. So I'll give a few that we talked about at the onset. As educators in the United States, but also across the world, in many cases, the way that our schools generate income to pay people to work at those schools is based upon seat time and attendance. Well, right now, for many of us, that's not how we're getting paid. We're not getting paid on average daily attendance and seat time. So that's no longer a limiting factor. We've all, not all, I don't want to categorize that. I've used excuses when I was in a classroom where we say, teachers aren't engaged in new and different practices in our classrooms. Well, classrooms got blown up. There was no practice that we're relying upon. We were in free fall, and to understand that as an opportunity to try different things. We used to say things like, it's not possible because of the master schedule. Mm-hmm. I mean, particularly, and Jerry, I know you and I have had discussions together about being what I referred to as high school humans, right? Where we were at high school and, talking about the master schedule, and how we're going to through. Well, there's no more factual master schedule that has to exist in that same way. So what we're talking about, and Bobby, you talked about the Christensen Institute, and Dr. Christensen teaches us of different types of disruptive innovations. And one of the things I talked about in a different setting was, this isn't just a disruptive innovation. This is a paradigm shattering event that's happened inside of education. And that's really scary. Now, I'm the guy who gave a TED talk on ambiguity and embracing ambiguity. This is beyond ambiguity. This is no sense of what could be reality. It's why we have some of the issues of looking at not knowing what day it is at times, and what's there. So the question has become, whether you're a traditionalist or you're a progressivist or you're a social reconstructivist, whatever your position is, for me, the question has become, what can we learn from this on a day in, day out basis? And one of the things that we have talked about in education, and rightfully so, is that our students don't all need the same thing. What we're able to do in this moment is come up with different systems that can free our time to be invested differently, and can free resources to be invested differently. And that can be scary for a lot of people, particularly in the middle of an economic crisis where we rightfully are concerned as humans for our livelihood and well-being. And I will simply share that the thing that I did on the onset at Urban Discovery is I looked across the entire ecosystem, and I simply shared with everybody that worked there, fear not for your job. Whatever you made last month, you're going to make next month and the month after. Fear not for your healthcare. Whatever you made, you're going to. Everything's going to be okay. Now, what you're going to do may look different. Because we're going to have to design to that and figure that out. So we took away the fear of what's going to happen to my livelihood in terms of how do I support my family. That fear was off the table. And then we dove deeply into what has to be done next. And when we talk about coaching, outreach, and support, one of the things that happened very organically was noting, how much of the day we were working, but how to phase shift that day in different ways. So that way there would be supports available all the time, because, teachers need to still do curriculum planning, and more so right now. I just, shared, Jerry, that we had 30 days of professional development in this year. Normally we do 17. Now 17 is already a lot. Years ago we did 11. Years before that we did 5. When I was back at the school site, you got the 2 days before school started for PD, 1 day to set your classroom, and then you were into the year, and you got 2 days at the end to shut down the year, and you were lucky if you got an occasional half day here and there, right? So we are valuing professional development, thanks to people like you and your leadership pushing for teachers to get all of these resources. But when we really dove deep into that, the question was, how do we make sure at this moment of insecurity, and this was a core question, how do we make sure that no child, adolescent, or young adult, or their guardians, how do we make sure that none of them feel alone during this block of time, that any of them can pick up a phone and they'll have a human on the other side of that phone? And that was essential, and that's what started to drive the conversation. And even the people that were more traditional were recognizing that would require us to do things very differently. our secondary school people have been used to having conversations, how will we do things differently? Being a kindergarten teacher and doing this is really hard when so much of what you do is through the connection of a hug, of sitting next to, of touching a hand, of making a human connection, of being able to not call out, but to be able to sit with and direct, to be able to sit on the carpet together. But when we were able to talk like that, very quickly, even the most traditional ways of what we were doing started to fall away because other things weren't possible. And I recognize also that looks differently for everybody. Where we're located in the inner city in downtown San Diego, we were never in a position of school reopening metrics when we were reviewing them, even factually right now. And for those that are joining us from different states and from across the world, Jerry and I are in California, and we have school reopening metrics. And for elementary school, if you're not already open, the case rate that they're looking for COVID is that you don't have more than 25 per 100,000. And where I'm sitting, we typically have about 60 to 95 per 100,000 right now. So we're not in that range. So that's what started it, but also to be able to let everybody to voice their concerns and fears in a proactive way, and to be there for each other, and to accept that saying the way we did it is the only way. It wasn't an option because we already had demonstrated it wasn't. Now, whether it was a better way might be a different question. So that's how we started, Jerry.
Thank you for that, Shawn. And thank you for the question, Jerry. Just a time check, we have about 8 minutes. So I would love to hear from other folks. And I think Julio, I saw something from Raven as well. And so sorry, I feel like I'm going to butcher your name, Wiputra. So I would love to hear any of your comments or shares of your Fernando. I see you also posting. We'd love to hear from you all, some of the questions that you're asking in the chat, or the experience, or your answers, questions of Shawn, or some of your answers to the discussion questions. Julio, I saw you posted something. You mind sharing?
Sure. I was talking about the way I've tried to implement design thinking in my classes, especially during pandemic. Just for you to know, Shawn, I'm a teacher, ESL teacher. I teach in a private school here in Brazil. I teach mainly English as second language. But as the school is demanding now, I'm trying to enroll in a methodology which is called CLIO, which I trying to teach Brazilian students content of our curriculum, of high school curriculum in English, try to do the bridge. But what I've discussed here was, uh, especially during the pandemic, the idea of no control of their lives were very clear to me as a teacher. One way I try to mitigate or to explore possibilities were like with little sprints or short sprints of design thinking. I put them to interview each other and try to create a solution for each classmate. They in pairs do like interview, ask about ways they already liked or they experienced some improvements, things that they love to, and start to iterate as soon as they have the first idea. So this kind of situation, I kind of try to use as much as I could the IDO and the design school of Stanford kind of environment, and that's it. So far, we've co-created some little things, but I'm not very happy with it so far. So that was I was trying to say on chat.
Absolutely.
So,
Good
so
for
my
you.
question is, I'm sorry, man. I'd love you to share some of your experience in my position, like things that you've seen or the teachers doing, if these interviews, pair interviews, and with rapid prototyping had some good effect on your school, would be awesome to listen. Okay, sorry.
Absolutely, sir. So part of the difficulty with being in education and implementing any sort of design thinking protocol, and I think it also will speak to Jerry's question and point, it is understanding that we are as a profession, as a professional practice, we serve children, and we're very much risk averse. So we don't like to do things until we're certain that they're going to work in many ways. So what ends up happening is we end up fearing getting things happening, and that fear leads to a condition that I like to call innovation paralysis. So what we need to do for our classrooms and our schools and together is to get together in a process where we understand that innovation is a process of failing many times before we start to find things that work. So one of the things that we do at Urban Discovery is we celebrate failure. Now, we don't celebrate a intent to fail. No, we don't want to ever intend to fail. But what we do is we celebrate the spirit of innovation and knowing that we will fail in things, sharing out what it is that's happening, the rapid prototypes that are not working, and what things we've taken up to test scale on a broader region that end up not working, what we learn for it. But in terms of education, we're a field that I mean, let's be frank with and honest with each other. We tell students not to fail. We stigmatize failure in terms of grading systems, but what we don't recognize is that failing is part of a learning process. It's some of the most powerful ways of knowing and learning that we have available to us. So what we try and do on an ongoing basis is create forums where we can share what's happening. We can share what we're learning from them, and we say the term failure is not an option. It is not a realistic thing to have inside of an innovative structure. What we say is failure is not an expectancy, but it does happen. And we got to support each other through that and learn from it and grow and rapidly bounce and iterate and go through and be able to do those things. So we're seeing it with our teachers across the board, that they're sharing what's happening, that they are iterating, they are trying new things, and we're balancing a very fine line between a system and constantly having a change. And not to go into depth here, we use change management and project management systems. We're on Asana and different things, sharing items, and communication flows become really, really, really important. So that way, all of that's being shared constantly across the system. So I'm hoping I answered your question. I also acknowledge I'm an administrator, and at times that means I'm a little bit of a politician, and I might not have answered it fully.
Thank you, Shawn. So I'm noticing the time, and I am really hurt because I see all of these really wonderful questions that are popping up in the chat, and I wish that we could get to them. One of the things that I will say is I'm going to copy some of this transcript, and maybe something that I'll work with Shawn to do is potentially getting him these questions if he's up for it, and maybe answering them so we can post them in the community hub as like a follow-up. So if you have a question, please, one, post to the hub on this event, or you can post in this chat. I'd also maybe love a continuing conversation. Raven, you're right. And so maybe we'll see what that could look like. No, thank you. Thank you for the chat. That's what this is for. And you're right. And so, you know, moving forward, like we said, this is our first one. And so we'll also think about timing, you know, and ways that we can increase discussion timing so we can hear more voices. But because we are at time, I do want to honor everyone's time, and I want to thank all of you for coming. I know for some of you, it is really early. I know some of you are in different parts of the world, not just in the United States. So thank you for being, I see dark windows, so being up late, or, you know, blue windows, so being up really, really early. I really appreciate you, and we'll get you some follow-up. It's good to see everybody. And also thank you, Shawn, for giving us some time, some really hefty concepts and things to dig deep into and to think about. Yeah, and stay safe, everyone, and we will see you at the next chat. And look on the hub. We'll follow up with some more good stuff there too. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you, Shawn.